Hi, you're listening to Andy Mason, and this is authentic conversations around the messy intersection of family, faith, and business. And today I want to talk to you about uncertainty and how to live with it. I am sitting at home. I am recording this actually in my bedroom. I've got kids at the other end of the house, 4 teenagers at home. Outside it is beautiful, and I am super grateful for where we live. But even if I contrast last week to this week, it seems like there's more uncertainty. At least last week, we were in the middle of this shelter at home, 30 days. We kind of knew the boundaries. There were some restrictions and limitations we knew were in place. This week, there's talk, there's more and more talk about lifting those. What's that going to look like? Is it going to be, desks 6 feet apart? What is it going to look like at the restaurants? What's going to look like planning? I've got to do a budget. So am I budgeting events, live events, 100 people, 200 people? Can I have more than that? If I have, will people come? And we're just trying to process all these things. And I'm realizing more and more again, I'm just faced with uncertainty. I actually have more uncertainty now than I did a week ago. And I don't know, it's probably the same with you. It's like we are living with increased measure of uncertainty. One thing is clear, life is not normal. It's not going back to normal anytime soon. Even if things change tomorrow, it's going to take a while to get things moving, changing. Some things will be gone forever. Some things will have changed. I don't know. Am I always going to be carrying around a set of hand sanitizer, or in my travels will there be a face mask? I don't know. There's so much of that I just don't know. But one thing I do know is I've personally, myself and my wife, have learned a lot in the last 10 years. And I think I've got a virtual degree in living with uncertainty. Or at least this would be one of those cases where maybe it was a certificate of participation, because at least I've lived through it. And I can genuinely say that my life is better now than it was before, but I had no idea 2008, how much my life was based on this surreal expectation or false belief that everything was certain and under control. In 2008, we left New Zealand, left behind a certain job, a certain salary, a certain healthcare system, a certain education future for my kids. I left behind certain friends and family, and we followed the voice of God to Redding, California. And I've been living with uncertainty since, uncertainty around immigration. We're right in the middle of that right now, and that's been deferred because of the current situation. So that's still uncertain. We had uncertainty around income, uncertainty around employment, uncertainty about relationships. We're part of a ministry school, and it's a 3-year program, 1 year at a time. And so the friends that we made in the first year had gone in the second year. So we've got to start all over again. Continually uncertain. Health in my family, retirement, how am I going to pay for my kids? All of these uncertain things that we've navigated in the last 10 years, including buying a house with no money, moving in, 6 weeks later we have a fire. We spend 3 months out of it. We move back in, and 2 months later we have a once in 50 years snowfall that destroys a bunch of the trees that survived the fire. Uncertainty. So much of our life is based on uncertainty, and it didn't produce beautiful things in me. Actually, what it did do is triggered a whole heap of fear and insecurities. It looked like, quote, frustration, but actually, really, it's just anger. And the anger was manifesting because I had less control than I thought I did. So what's the point? The point is we are in a situation right now where we've got uncertainty. The reality was we had it beforehand. Now we're just more aware of it. Here's for us, not once did God let us down. It was scary. It was painful. It was especially painful looking at how I responded. It was confusing. It was unstable, but I'm better today because of what has come out of it. More so because of the faithfulness of God than of any awesome decision making on my part. So you're faced with this same uncertainty. And from my experience and what I see, there tends to be three different responses, and I've done all three. So here's a heads up what's going on and what you can do about it. Number one is passive surrender, which is I have no control. Number two is active resistance, I'll take control. And three is wise decision making, which is I am under control. I'm going to unpack these some more and tell you some different stories about what that looks like in my life. But let's talk about first. Number one is the passive surrender. This looks like blame, accusation, powerlessness, ignorance, avoiding facing the issues. I've done this. I'm thinking of one time where God had spoken to us about buying a house. He said, we're going to have land in this land, and this is the house we're actually sitting in right now. He led us to it, showed it to us, and the bottom line is there is absolutely no way we could afford it. But I had all these words from God confirmed by others. I had these testimonies, and we've got this history of that happening again and again and again over 10 years. So that removed my excuse not to trust that I'm hearing God. My wife and I are in agreement. We're navigating this. We're submitting it to people. But it's just like, how on earth are we supposed to do it? So we end up getting into this house by paying an $80,000 deposit and then agreeing on a rent agreement for 12 months. Because we said, God just said, move forward. I'm like, how do we move forward? He said, just one step by one step and trust me. So it's either the biggest risk in my life in terms of, it's the biggest risk. I could lose the $80,000. We could lose all this, and it'd be the most expensive rental situation in my life. Or this is God. And I had to put my faith where my mouth is and take step by step by step. So we got through that. We saw him provide, even with the rent. It just was amazing, the things that unfolded once we said yes. It wasn't before we said yes, it was after we said yes. They're literally step by step. God spoke to me a scripture out of the pool of Bethesda story, where there's this man who's been crippled since birth. He's 38 years old. He's sitting around the pool, and Jesus, the healer, walks up, says to him, do you want to be well? And he has so lost hope, he's so lost vision, he's so lost the future that he doesn't even answer the question with a yes or no. No longer does he say, yes, I do. He just defers straight to the reasons why he cannot. I can't. He's powerless. I can't. There's no one to carry me. And I'd been saying the same, God, how do I buy this house? Because I've got nothing to carry, no finance that would carry. The bank say no, the owner says no, there's no way for us to do it. And then I process back with God, and I hear Jesus say, number one, stand up, which for me is own it, take ownership, take responsibility, make this declaration that you are wanting this house. Stop dithering between two opinions, make a choice. So number one, make a choice. Number two, pick up your mat, which looks like making the decision to let go whatever you have now. So for us, that looked like selling the smaller house we had and then moving into this bigger one, as in making that decision. When we put that on the market, it literally sold in one weekend. So now I'm faced with, oh my gosh, either God comes through with some stopgap finance or we're actually homeless. And then the third one was stand up, pick up your mat and walk, which is literally day by day making decisions, following his voice. So we move in here, we're in this house, we know we've got 12 months to come up with the balance of proceeds, and it's literally more than double. It's more than double what we can afford and what a bank would lend us. And I was in banking, so I understand how that works. It's like, this is the stupidest thing. It's either the stupidest thing in my life or it's God. There is no gap in between the two. So we're tracking through and we get right through to May. It's the 12 months is coming up in June. I'm a bit nervous, but I keep hearing God say, trust me, trust me, trust me, walk forward. And then I met with a friend, his name's Tony Stoltzfus, and I was telling him the story. And he said, hey, what's going on with the house? Well, where are you at? And I said, well, this is what God said. He's going to provide. And Tony looks at me and he says, Andy, are you expecting money just to like fall out of the sky? And I kind of looked at him because I was in passive surrender. I have no control of this. There's nothing I can do about it. So I'm just going to wait and trust God. Passive. So he says, What can you do? I'm thinking, well, nothing. I don't have that money. All of the efforts that I can of making money actually haven't worked either. So I've just got to trust God. He goes, well, you know all these different people. You've got people all around you that are really, really smart when it comes to investments and business. Have you spoken to any of them? And I started to feel really sheepish and I realized, I'm realizing my passive surrender is actually hiding behind I'm trusting God. I'm being powerless. And what I'm really doing is avoiding talking and letting anyone know because I'm embarrassed of the situation, because I'm scared of asking, and I'm afraid of failure because what if they say no and reject me? So Tony encourages me to go and ask Jesus who I should talk to. Don't just talk to anybody, but ask the Holy Spirit which of the people that you have a relationship with that you could talk to, and ask directly. I'm asking for advice. I'm asking for wisdom. I'm asking for insight. I'm asking for feedback. This is our situation. I don't know if you're in a position to help me or not, but this is what I need. I need you to look at me. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm facing my fears. I'm facing the things that I avoided doing by calling it, I'm just trusting God. It's like, no, that's passive surrender. And so I wrote down this list of 6 people and then actually had a dream. And so in that dream, there was another person. And so I knew from the dream I needed to talk to that person as well. So literally I went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people that I spoke to. Every single one of them, it built a deeper friendship and connection because I was upfront, vulnerable, and open. And each of them came back and said, Andy, I would love to help you. Here's my advice. Here's some wisdom. They gave me insight and feedback in that process. But not a single one was in a position to help us financially or had a solution. So I'm like, God, I feel encouraged and closer to my friends, but that's not moved us at all closer to securing this property. What do I do now? Well, there was one more name on that list. And that was the one that I was avoiding the most. I'm like, oh no, I've got to do it now. I thought, okay, I've got nothing more to lose. So I emailed this person, and in the subject line, I put, this feels vulnerable. And I just laid out really clearly, really succinctly, this is our situation, this is what I've done. And I didn't actually put all of the God stuff because I didn't want to come across in any way like I was pulling out a God card or manipulating anything. I just said, if you want to know about the God story, you can talk to me. But here's the facts and figures. Here's my financial situation. Here's my fallback position. I'd love your feedback and input on this and see what you can do. And then I hit send, thinking this could be the end of a friendship. I don't know what's going to happen, but I guess I've got to the point of I've got nothing else to lose. Short while later, I get a response back. It turns to an hour-long phone call. And he asks really direct questions like, so how'd you get into this? And why'd you do that? And so what you're telling me is that you bought a house that you can't afford. Yep, that's right. So why did you do that? Because I was following the voice of God. Okay, no, I understand. I'm like, I'm feeling stupid talking to someone who's so sound in investments. And oh man, I've just followed the voice of God. It seemed crazy, but look what's happened over time. So I do that. It turns into actually a wonderful conversation where he gives advice about going back to the owner, getting owner finance, what that could look like, how to do that. So I go back, I follow his advice, have a second call that further directs us. Now we've got 75% of what we need, and we're still a chunk of money short, but we're tracking. So now I've just got to come up with a shortfall. And so I'm talking to him for the final time. I remember exactly where I was. And he said, where are you at? I said, this is where we're at. This is what we need to make it work, to close on the house. And we've made this progress. This is what I've got to come up with. And he says, okay, well, it's interesting you say that because this morning, this is in his words, I was reading Psalm 37 and I read, the righteous are generous and lend, and their children after them are blessed. And it carries on, the righteous shall possess the land. Andy, I think you're supposed to have this land. And I'm just like, hearing that from someone outside my grid and my bubble was so encouraging. Secondly, he said, I just think you must have crazy favor with the man upstairs. Because I think reading that, the righteous are generous and lend, and their children after them are blessed, I feel like I'm supposed to lend you this shortfall of funds. And so here's the deal. I'm going to lend it to you. It's going to be interest-free indefinitely. And I want you to know, I know that you want to pay it back, and I'd love to receive a check back at some point. But if you can't, I want you to know that it's already written off my books. And I just sat there in my truck and just said, is it okay if I cry? Just the relief, the overwhelmed, the situation. But what's the point? The point is, I started off passive. I started off just trusting God blindly and not taking responsibility for what was in my hand to do. There is always something you could do. In my situation, it was asking, open hand, asking Holy Spirit, who do I talk to? And even how do I talk to them? And it turned into an interest-free loan that meant that we could get into this house that we are in today. We owner financed 6.75% for 3 months, and then we're in a position where the bank would lend us the same amount of money for 3.75% fixed. What's the point? Passive surrender is I have no control. It looks like blame, accusation, powerlessness, ignorance, avoiding facing the issues. I know I've done it, and I know some of you are doing that right now. Don't be passive. You always have a choice. No choice is a choice to be powerless. Trusting God is not passive. Surrender to God, to trust, is active and engaged. It's not simply waiting for someone else to tell you what to do, but intentionally leaning in, looking around, doing what is in your hand, and choosing practical hope. What can you do now, and what will you do now? The second one, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's active resistance. It's I'll take control. This looks like reacting to what others or the authorities are saying by doing the opposite, rather than what we're going to come to in a moment, which is the wise decision making. This one sounds like, you can't tell me what to do. I have rights. So you sneak around or you blatantly do something, usually only considering yourself. That's the key to this one, is they do something out of that, I'm going to take control. But usually the common fruit of it, or the common ingredients or flavor, is they're actually not commonly thinking about anybody else other than their own individual circumstance and surrounding. Really does this response take into consideration others in the community, especially those less vulnerable? That looked like in my situation, we went 3 years with no income. So it was scary, and I was stressing out and fussing and running around doing stuff rather than pausing, thinking through my situation, involving wise counselors, and making a well thought out plan. It looked like me focusing more on my problems and calling it responsibility, and having limited capacity or compassion for the people around me, especially my wife. We'd have conversations, I'd keep turning it back onto myself. If she'd talk about something, I did damage in my relationship because I was so focused on, I want control, I'm going to get control, I'm going to do this. I was just focused on me, and what I can do, rather than thinking about the wider story. For us right now, regardless of what happens with a governor or a president making decisions about the country, I've got to choose how I'm going to respond, because I've got a daughter who is immune vulnerable. She gets asthma. If she gets a cold, she struggles to breathe because of the asthma, let alone some other virus. So I've got to choose. Everywhere I go, I might be fine. I'm perfectly fit and strong. But if I carry something back, how would I feel if I bring that back to my daughter and she is permanently affected? That's not going to be fun. So I'm not just going to, I'll take control and do it. I'm going to make a wise decision, thought out with the people, especially those more vulnerable than me. I'm going to make the decision with them in mind. And finally, number 3, this is where I want to get to. After 10 years for me, I might just start be learning to do this. Wise decision making, which is I am under control. It's all about self-control. My friend Danny Silk says, freedom is telling yourself what to do and doing it, rather than being dictated by the circumstances or some external form of governance. It's telling yourself what to do and following through. It's looking at the options, looking at the situation. It's taking into consideration all the stakeholders and then making a wise, thought out decision. This looks like hope in the middle of despair, peace in the middle of turmoil, and thoughtful consideration in the middle of panic. It thinks long-term and acts today. It takes into consideration how one's actions will affect the immediate and wider community and follows through with a plan to the best of one's ability. It is not passive, but intentional action, knowing that we cannot control the outcome anyway. We can control our behaviors, and moment by moment, we can give our best in every circumstance. It's a life of active surrender that takes responsibility for oneself, but knows that the ultimate outcome is in the hands of God. And we have absolute security in that. So there's always something you can do. There's always something that you can do, something that's in your hand that you can action. There's always someone that you can be a voice of encouragement and wisdom to. So what will you do? Here's the final thing. I've just released a book that came out of the last years of my 10 years of walking through uncertainty. It's literally 30 different stories, good, bad, and ugly, and how I anchored in hope through hearing God and applying it to practical action step every day. That's what's resulted in me making wise decisions to get me where I am today. I highly recommend you grab a copy and go through it chapter a day. Even better, grab someone else and do it. You'll find it on Amazon. You'll find it on the Bethel bookstore. There's so many different places you can get it. And also you can join myself and Ray Edwards are doing a 30-day hope challenge. You can jump on with us for free every single day. We're walking and processing one of those chapters, which is an interwoven, here's the good, the bad, the ugly of what I've done in uncertainty, and how we're making decisions with the voice of God on a day-by-day basis. So I trust this has helped you. Send it to someone else that needs to hear this, and I will see you or listen to you or connect with you about this time next week.